Okay, so we're talking about the inauguration of William Henry Harrison. Now, when is inauguration days now? What month? January. I think it's going to be the 20th that they're going to inaugurate President-elect Trump in. In these days, for some reason, they all were in March. And this was no different. So inauguration day for William Henry Harrison was March 4th, 1841. And the weather was very unfavorable that day. So on March 4th, 1841, the day that William Henry Harrison would be inaugurated into office, the weather was very unfavorable. Very cold, windy, what you might consider a brisk, cold day in Washington. Well, you got to remember that William Henry Harrison was 68 years old when he was elected to the presidency. And there was some talk about maybe he shouldn't give his address in the bad weather, that he should maybe do it inside or at another time, but he insisted on delivering his inaugural address outside even though the weather was bad. He felt it was traditional and he wanted to do it that way. And it rained throughout his 1 hour and 40-minute speech. And by the time he was done, at the latter stages of the speech, there was a drenching rain coming down. So very unfavorable, okay? But he decided to give the speech anyway. It lasts 1 hour and 40 minutes during the time in which it rained, and especially rained hard, drenching rain, towards the end. Well, after his inaugural speech in this weather, he arrives at the White House. Traditionally, what you do is you give your speech and then you travel down up Pennsylvania Avenue to the White House and take possession, so to speak, and become president. Well, when he arrived at the White House from the Capitol, where he gave his inaugural speech, he was just drenched, soaking wet, and he came down with a cold soon afterwards. Okay, he came down with a cold soon afterwards. And it grew progressively worse, and he developed what? Pneumonia. Got pneumonia. Now, I probably better spell that one for you, huh? There you go. Pneumonia. So he developed pneumonia. Well, this is 1841. Medicine was a little different. And after just being in office a month, he actually died of pneumonia in office. Only served a month. And he died on April 4th, ironically, 1 month to the day from when he gave his speech, April 4th, 1841. So he catches pneumonia during his inauguration speech and dies on April 4th, 1841. So John Tyler becomes the first vice president in American history to do what? Succeed to the presidency. Yep. Becomes the first vice president in history to succeed to the presidency. Now it's kind of interesting because at that period of time, you didn't expect that type of thing. There was no succession to take over the vice presidency. So John Tyler's presidency included no vice president. Included no vice president.
If that were to happen today, who would be the vice president?
They have a semblance of order as far as the Speaker of the House would move himself up. Okay, if the president and the vice president both were disabled or killed, the Speaker of the House would become the president. Yeah. So, okay, now we're not going to talk a whole lot about the presidency of John Tyler, because during that time we had something called the Mexican War, which we're going to talk more about the war than we will the administration, but a little bit. But two very important issues occurred during the administration of John Tyler, and this is kind of where we're going to leave it for him, because we're going to move into new presidents and a war here. But the first thing that happened during the presidency of John Tyler is the boundaries of the United States extended to the Pacific Ocean. Okay, the boundaries of the United States are going to extend to the Pacific Ocean. Now that was a positive. But it was during the administration of John Tyler where differences of opinion between the citizens of the North and of the South became increasingly serious. So it was during the administration of John Tyler that differences of opinion between the citizens of the North and the citizens of the South became increasingly serious. And these differences of opinion between the citizens of the North and of the South eventually, not right away, but eventually lead to what? Civil war. Okay, so those are the two significances of the Tyler presidency, is the boundaries of the nation were extended to the Pacific, number one, and number two, that differences of opinion between the citizens of the North and citizens of the South became increasingly serious, which would eventually result in a civil war. Okay, but we got a ways to go on that. All right, so get out to the front of your notes here and we'll have ourselves a little review. Starting with the inauguration of Andrew Jackson. Might ask you a couple of examples of how things got out of control at Jackson's inauguration. Anybody know one of those examples? Men in money boots did what?
They climbed all over the furniture.
That's right. What else happened, Kellyanna?
Fights.
We had fights both in the White House and in the surrounding area. Ivan?
Furniture was broken.
Furniture was broken, and JC?
Food was knocked everywhere. Things were crazy.
Yeah, making a heck of a mess, okay? I'd also know what King Mob was. Do you know what that is? What's King Mob, Sheriff?
It's where the wealthy were appalled by this thing they thought that law and order had been taken.
That's a pretty good answer. Where the wealthy people thought that law and order had been taken over by a mob of crazy common people. And they called them King Mob, okay? All right, let's talk about the presidency of Andrew Jackson. I would know the 3 firm convictions he had, despite the fact that he didn't have any program or plan going into the presidency. Delaney, what was one of his firm convictions?
Limit the federal government.
Limit the federal government. Very good. How about another one, Michaela?
The government belongs to all the people it controls.
That's right. And the third one, Brady?
Power of the president.
He believed in the power of the presidency. Very good. Okay. Now, I'd like you to know, and Maddie's going to tell us what the spoils system of politics is. And I'll help you with the definition of what I want, but tell me what you think the spoils system of politics is.
So they took like their political opponents and office. So they like replaced their political opponents in office with those that supported them.
Right. And spoils system meant to the victor belong the spoils. So the answer I'm looking there for is what Jackson did in creating the spoils system of politics is just like Maddie said. He replaced all political opponents in office with those that were considered supporters. Okay? And you should know why that necessarily didn't benefit the government. Caitlin, why would that, if I said to you, explain why the spoils system does not necessarily benefit a government, what would be your answer to that?
When someone is in a position just because they're loyal to like the presidency, they may not know like what they're supposed to be doing necessarily. They don't change those things.
Right? So there's 2 parts to that. So you put people in there that are loyal to the president, they may not know what they're doing. But even if they know what they're doing, they may not tell the president what they really think because they're afraid to hurt his feelings or make him mad because they're loyal. Not going to give him an honest opinion. Now, I'm going to tell you something here that has nothing to do with it in a way, but it does. And you'll hear about this next year. John Kennedy picked his brother Bobby Kennedy to be his attorney general. And that was kind of the spoils system of government because Bobby had absolutely no political experience not political experience, he had no legal experience. The attorney general advises the president on matters of law. Bobby Kennedy was a lawyer, but he had never went out and even practiced law. He might have been the last person that could help the president on matters of law. But John Kennedy picked his brother because he knew he was loyal, he could trust him, and he would give him an honest answer. Now that's a little bit different we're talking about here. But he knew that if he thought he was doing something wrong, his brother would not say, oh, gee whiz, I don't want to hurt your feelings. I'm not going to say what you should be doing. He would tell him. So that was a little bit different. But it was an example kind of the spoils. So in most instances, these appointees would not make decisions that was on the best interest of the country. So I think you got that figured out. Okay, Tristan, as far as Andrew Jackson's kitchen cabinet, who were a lot of the people what profession were a lot of the people he put in the cabinet?
They were editors of the press.
Yeah, they were members of the press, especially editors of newspapers, okay? And the kitchen cabinet were unofficial advisors, right? And how did they get their name, Taylor? Why did they call it the kitchen cabinet? They snuck them through the back kitchen door, so nobody saw them. Okay, good. I would know who Thomas Hart Benton was. Paige, can you tell me who that is? Sage, not Paige, Sage. Who was Thomas Hart Benton?
He was the
Thomas Hart Benton.
Oh, he was the West guy during like the powerful congressman. He was a powerful congressman for the West.
He was a powerful member of Congress that represented the western part of the United States during the Jackson presidency. Very good. Okay. Emily, what was Henry Clay's nickname?
Very powerful.
The Great Compromiser. Very good. Okay. Siobhan, just give me a short definition of the Indian Resettlement Act of 1830. What did it state? What did the act provide?
he stated that all Indians in the eastern and the west
And would be put where? You got the first part, right? She said that the act provided for the removal of Indian tribes from east of the Mississippi River to west. But where were they going to put them once they put them in the west? They were going to place them on, well, they didn't call it that yet. The Indian Territory, okay? So the Indian Resettlement Act of 1830 provided for the removal of Indian tribes to lands west of the Mississippi River, and they would be relocated in Indian Territory. They didn't call them reservations yet, okay? Now, who were the first Indians that resisted the Indian Resettlement Act of 1830, Paris? That's right, the Sauk and the Fox Indians. Very good. Okay. You know that the 5 civilized tribes, those that tried to adopt the white man's way, were the Creek, Choctaw, Chickasaw, Cherokee, and Seminole. Which of those 3 signed removal treaties with the government by the end of 1833, Dave?
The Creek, Choctaw, and Chickasaw.
Right. And which 2 did not do that, Lauren? They refused to sign. Cherokee and Seminole. And we know that the Seminoles lost a war, right? And they ended up succumbing and moving west of the Mississippi, except for those scattered few that snuck into the Florida Everglades, right? But what, Morgan, did the Cherokee do?
They tried to adopt the white man way, and then Georgia told them to move to stay against the Supreme Court.
Very good. And what did the Supreme Court say?
That they didn't have to,
But what did they do? No, they moved him anyway, right? They moved him anyway. They actually ignored the Supreme Court decision by John Marshall, which you're doing your assignment on, and moved him anyway. And President Jackson was not in support of that ruling either, was he? His point was Marshall made the ruling, let him enforce it. So those Indians, those Cherokee Indians, were actually moved in the middle of the winter, right? But they were a fairly organized bunch. Give me an example, if you would, Casey, of their organization. One example of the Cherokees' organization.
They had their own written language.
Own written language, very good. Dalton, give me another example of their organization.
They have a newspaper
Written in,
in their language.
very good. Josh, give me another example of them being organized.
They had schools,
For
children.
the children, and what was another one, Olivia?
They had laws and law enforcement,
Because they had what?
and they had a constitution.
Right, they had a written constitution, it meant they had laws, law enforcement, and a judicial system. You should know a couple of those examples of their organization. Okay? Now, true or false? Some Cherokee leaders did agree to sign the removal treaty. True or false? True. And what was the name of that treaty they agreed to sign? Treaty of New Echota. But there was one Cherokee chief that would not do it. He fought fought him the whole way, Macklin. What was that Indian chief's name? Cherokee chief. He resisted till the end, and as a result of his resistance, they moved his 20,000 members of his tribe by force. Who was that Cherokee chief that would not sign it under any circumstances? Had a white name. Okay, anybody want to help out? John Ross. So keep in mind that all of these 5 civilized tribes succumbed to this Indian policy, with the exception of those under the direction of Cherokee Chief John Ross. About 20,000 men, women, and children said they would not. So they relocated them at what? Gunpoint in the middle of the winter. And what percent of the Cherokee tribe, Elise, perished along the way? 25%. Okay, very good. Now, Kezia, I want you to tell me just briefly a little bit about the legend of the Trail of Tears according to Indian legend.
A single Cherokee rose, which was the Georgia state flower, would grow where every tear fell.
Very good, yep. According to Indian legend, the Cherokee rose, which was the Georgia state flower, grew every spot that a tear fell during the Trail of Tears. That's quite a story. Okay, all right. Let's see what else we got going here. Okay, I would know a couple of reasons why Jackson, other than seeing the Bank of the United States as a money power, what other 2 reasons did Jackson attack the Bank of the United States? Dane, give me one.
He disliked and distrusted banks.
He disliked and distrusted banks, and Maddie, what was the other one?
He didn't understand the banking system.
Very good. So the question is going to be, other than the fact that Jackson saw the Bank of the United States as a money power or monopoly, what other reasons did he have for wanting to attack the Bank of the United States? Okay? All right. Let's see. JC, you should know this. Briefly explain how Andrew Jackson destroyed the Bank of the United States.
So he took money out of the bank. And
What type of money? Couldn't take your money out.
Government money.
Okay.
And he withdrew it and he put it into separate state banks,
Okay, what were they called?
pet banks.
And what happened because he took the federal funds from the Bank of the United States and put them in these certain state banks, pet banks? What happened?
The bank shut down.
Well, not exactly. It does funny, but what we're looking for here, and she's very close, is that Jackson gradually withdrew federal money from the Bank of the United States and deposited in state banks that were loyal to him. That's why they were called pet banks, teacher's pet, president's pet banks. And when he did that, it weakened the Bank of the United States so much that its lease was not renewed by Congress. And once the lease was not renewed by Congress, it closed then in 1836. Does that all make sense? Okay? So kind of know what he did to destroy the bank. I would know who Richard Lawrence was. I would know who Hugh L. White was. I would know what the favorite son policy was in the election of 1836. And the favorite son policy is when the Whig Party decided to nominate 3 different candidates for president with the hope that none of the candidates, including Martin Van Buren, would receive the necessary electoral votes to win the presidency, which would result in that election going to the House of Representatives where the Whig Party thought they could win. That's what the favorite son policy was. Everybody understand that? It was a policy in which the Whigs nominated not 1, but 3 presidential candidates in 1836 with the strategy that with 4 people running, them including Martin Van Buren, with 4 people running, no one would receive the majority of electoral votes, which would swing the election to the House where the Whigs thought they could win. That's the favorite son policy. Obviously it didn't work, but that was their policy. Okay. And I would know the 2 important issues that occurred during the administration of John Title. And that should do it.
Who were the people you said we needed to know? Lawrence? And
You talked to the ID people I want you to know. Richard Lawrence,
yeah.
Q.L. White. Who else did I say? And Rick, you should know Richard Johnson also. I missed him. Richard Johnson, Richard Lawrence, Q.L. White. Who was Q.L. White? One of the 3 that ran for president in 1836 on the Whig campaign. Who was Richard M. Johnson? Martin Van Buren's